Hi everyone, it's Craig Campbell with another look at a 1956 Topps card, my favorite set from the 50s, and today we're going to be looking at Del Crandall, who was a catcher for the Milwaukee Braves. And here you can see Del as a catcher, he's got the plate blocked. Appears probably to be a Brooklyn Dodger player that he's got the plate pretty well blocked. And I imagine the ball's in his glove there, and he's out. But I love these 1956 cards. I love the action photos. And I've had this Del Crandall card for a long time. And you can find Del Crandall pretty much in any common lot. He certainly is not a star player. But a lot of people don't know about Del Crandall and really how good of a player he was. And I think if we take this deep dive into Del Crandall's baseball career, we'll come away pretty surprised at what a quality player he was. Now, he grew up in California, and shortly after the age of 16, Major League Scouts started to look at him, and his dad invested in his career. His dad supported his career in high school, but his dad did not want him to sign with the Dodgers, the Yankees, or the Cardinals because they had too many prospects in their farm system. The Dodgers pursued Crandall relentlessly, and they rejected their $20,000 signing bonus, which was about 20 times the family's income in 1946. Because as a bonus baby, you had to stay on the major league roster for 2 years, which often destroyed the development of a young player, and they never succeeded in the major leagues. Instead, Crandall signed with the Boston Braves, a 2-year contract for $4,000. That was more money than my parents or I had ever seen. So Del Crandall signed with the Boston Braves in 1949. Less than 4 months after his 19th birthday, Del Crandall became the youngest starting catcher in baseball history when he supplanted 32-year-old Bill Selked of the Boston Braves. Returning to the Milwaukee Braves in 1953 after a 2-year tour in the military, Crandall was named to 8 All-Star teams during the Braves' first 10 seasons in Milwaukee, and he established himself as arguably the best defensive catcher of his era, annually ranking among the league leaders in practically every important defensive stat that there is. In 1949, he was assigned to the Evansville Braves in the Class B minor league system. And he had a very good defensive coach there that really showed him how to pick runners off and how to be a good defensive catcher. As a matter of fact, General Manager John Quinn of the Boston Braves personally scouted this young phenom, who was batting .351 in 38 games in Evansville. It was a surprise when they told him, "Hey kid, you're going up to the big leagues." I had just turned 19 years old, and Lou Perini, the owner of the Braves, sent a private plane to get me. When I called my parents, I told my mother that I'm going to Boston, and she asked, "What for?" They couldn't believe that their son was already going to be in the major leagues. Crandall started at Crosley Field in Cincinnati, and he went hitless in his first 3 at-bats. But then with 8 hits in his next 15 at-bats and 6 RBIs, Crandall cemented his place as the Braves' backup catcher, and he started about 2/3 of the games in 1949. He was named to the Sporting News Rookie All-Star team. He finished with a .263 average with 34 RBIs and was runner-up to Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Don Newcomb for the Rookie of the Year award. Now, Del Crandall was a tall and muscular catcher. He weighed about 190 pounds, and he was blessed with tremendous athleticism. Crandall was known for his bullet arm, his cat-like quick movements behind the plate, and his unusual flexibility. However, he drew criticism from some veterans who took offense at how he ran all over the park and threw to all 3 bases to keep the runners on. He said, "When I got to the big leagues, picking off guys was not done that much. Fielders were just not used to a catcher throwing to pick off a runner. Certainly, managers did not encourage the first or third baseman to cover a bag." In 1950, Crandall expected to have a breakout year, but he played in only 79 games over the next 3 years. He was sidelined with a broken finger, and then He suffered one year with a disappointing average of 220 and 255 at bats, but then his career was interrupted when he was drafted in the Army in March of 1951. He was stationed in Fort Ord and then served in the infantry and saw active duty in Japan during the Korean War. When Del Crandall got out of the service, he came back to a dramatically different team. One, they were no longer the Boston Braves, but now the Milwaukee Braves. But this team in Milwaukee had assembled from the farm system a core of great young players: Billy Bruton, Johnny Logan, Eddie Matthews, Lou Burdette, Bob Buell, and then Hank Aaron came up. And of course, they had Gene Conley come up, and they had Warren Spahn, who was one of the homegrown players, one of the nucleuses of the Boston Braves to the Milwaukee Braves. Crandall had a good start. He got off to a 3.01 average, and he was named the first of his 8 All-Star games. But on July 8th, he was nicked on the right hand by a foul ball and ended up missing 2 weeks, and he struggled in the second half of 1953. Over the course of the decade of the 1950s, Crandall established himself as one of the best defensive catchers of his generation, indeed, big league history at that time. And this was really interesting, that Crandall led the National League in games caught 5 times, in fielding percentage 4 times, in putouts 3 times. He distinguished himself with that rifle arm. He placed the league in assists 6 times, in runners caught stealing 5 times, and double plays twice. Del Crandall was named captain at the age of 24. He was a quiet team leader. He was primarily, again, known as a defensive catcher. But only Roy Campanella and Yogi Berra exceeded Crandall's offensive output among catchers in the 1950s, which is really amazing. As an All-Star in 1954 and 55, Crandall hit 21 and the next year 26 home runs, but his batting average dropped. Del Crandall recalled the 1957 World Series. They were reading the papers, and everybody knew that the Yankees were such a great team, and they came into New York for Game 1, and Crandall recalled how he felt overwhelmed by the historical majesty of baseball's most celebrated park, Yankee Stadium. At the beginning of Game 1, he said, "I was intimidated by the Yankee Stadium." He said, "Honestly, I remember warming up Warren Spahn for the first game, and my knees were shaking." He said, "Spahny threw a screwball in the dirt, and I threw the ball back to second base. But then my nerves were gone." Del Crandall caught all 7 games of that 1957 World Series, and again, the 1958 World Series. He was hailed as one of the finest catchers in baseball, a big factor of the success of the world champion Braves in 57, 58. They didn't win the World Series in 58, but the 2 World Series appearances. And Crandall also had a very discerning eye at the plate, which really surprises me. For a guy that wasn't that great of a hitter average-wise, he only struck out 477 times in 5,583 career plate appearances. Crandall was on an aging team as the team aged, and so did he. And he hurt himself in 1961. Joe Torre took over as the catcher. And like many aging veterans, Crandall spent his final years as a baseball nomad, serving as a backup catcher for the Giants in 64, the Pirates in 65, and then finally the Cleveland Indians in 1966. Del Crandall retired after that 66 season as one of the most honored catchers in baseball history. He finished with 179 home runs, 657 runs batted in, with a 254 average. But he had the reputation as being one of the best signal callers ever, and of course being a great defensive catcher. He was hired by the Milwaukee Brewers in 1971 to lead their AAA team, and then called up to the big leagues in 72 through 75. The team never did finish better than 5th place under Del Crandall's managerial time, but he was credited with being a real good developer of players, to include Darrell Porter. And Crandall came back into the dugout in 1983 with the Seattle Mariners during the midseason, as the team was well on their way to over 100 losses. And that was his last time in the dugout on the Major League roster. Del Crandall died in May of 2021. He was 91 years old, but he was the last surviving member of the Boston Braves. And again, as we look at Del Crandall, and you can see just the beautiful card here with him blocking the plate. And, the hobby is more than just slabs and grades and what's a card worth. The hobby's much more than that to me. I remember Del Crandall as a manager of the Milwaukee Brewers when I was a young a young kid growing up, a young teenager. And I really didn't know much about Del Crandall's career. But after reading books, the Warren Spahn book, the Henry Aaron book, some of these Milwaukee Brave books, and to realize how good of a catcher Del Crandall was, how important he was to the Milwaukee Braves, and really just the dominance of a defensive catcher in the 50s. And so Del Crandall really should hold a place, more than just more than just a guy that we overlook. Of course, we like the bigger cards, the Hank Aaron's, the Sandy Koufax, as we all do. But Del Crandall was an important player on a really good team. And he's just part of the legacy of baseball that makes this hobby so great that we can look back at cards to yesteryear and beautiful cards with him blocking the plate here. And so I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive look at Del Crandall. I really enjoy these 1956 cards, and I'm going to continue to make some more videos of just some deep dives on players. This one's a little bit long because Crandall had a pretty long career with a lot of notoriety during his time. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the hobby.